German Nationals is approaching. I think, what is it, 2 or 3 weeks at this point? It's getting very close. I've been following the format, but I haven't been playtesting the most serious decks at locals in recent weeks, as you know. I brought Paleo, I brought Orcust and all that kind of stuff. Just some decks that I wanted to play for fun. For yesterday's locals, I decided to try something that has been popping up in the TCG a lot, and that's Melodious. I decided to play pure Melodious to try out those cards, and I'm going to show you the list and talk about my experience and what I think of the deck. I did think the deck was actually pretty good, and I will say I'm happy to report that my locals seems to have gotten a lot more competitive recently after the initial start, because yesterday we had a couple more people than usual, and it was 4 rounds of Swiss, and I played against Snake Eyes, Labyrinth, Branded, and Chimera. I did manage to win the locals. As always, I'll leave a link to the locals in the description down below, just in case you're from Germany, living close to Hessen, and you want to check it out. I want to help them grow a community. I will say this deck was a lot more complicated than I thought, because I made the mistake. I built the deck 30 minutes before, and I haven't really looked at any of the combo lines. I was like, it's gonna be fine. And then I played it, and then I realized, yo, this deck is way more complicated than I expected it to be. I messed up a couple of things. I'll talk about some of the things that you have to be careful of. So I guess this is also going to be helpful if you're planning to pick up the deck yourself, or if you are playing against the deck, to be aware of all the different restrictions that they have. There's another thing I want to say about Melodious. In previous videos, when we criticized 1-card combos and all that kind of stuff, I said Melodious feels like Super Heavy Samurai, which is a deck that I really don't like, because you can like splash these cards in all kinds of other decks to have like broken 1-card combo starters. Like you open Ostinato, for example, in Snake Eyes, make a Banshee to search like Poplar or Snake Eye Ash and go into Appaloosa before you normal summon and all that kind of stuff. And my opinion on that particular version, or that way of using the Melodious cards, hasn't changed. That I don't like. The pure Melodious deck I think is really cool though after playing it, because yes, the deck has a bunch of 1-card combos, but I think the difference between this deck's 1-card combos and other, like for example Snake Eye Ash, is that this deck, it's just fair. If you're actually locked into Melodious because you use the Link monster or first movement solo, you're not doing anything super crazy. You're doing good stuff. The deck is good, but it's not over the top. If this is what 1-card combos do, I'm fine with them. So I think literally the only thing that's missing for Melodious to be a super well-designed archetype is like 1 sentence on Ostinato that locks you into Melodious. Literally, that's it. Let's go into the deck profile really quick. Before we do, I have a word from a sponsor, because if you are looking for OCG accessories like these sleeves, I want to give a quick shout out to Hold On Card Shop. The link is going to be in the YouTube description. You can use Josh5 for 5% off on all of these wonderful OCG sleeves over here. I don't know if they have these specific ones that I'm using in stock. Go check them out in the video description below. Very happy to have them as a sponsor for the channel. They sent me this pack of Zeus sleeves from the OCG, which are compliant with the newest policy update. You can use these because they are Yu-Gi-Oh officially branded. I'm gonna give these away to a lucky YouTube commenter. I have enough OCG sleeves myself. I don't need them. I'll give them away to someone leaving a comment on the YouTube video. Once again, thank you to Hold On Card Shop for sponsoring the stream and the channel. Let's move into Melodious. The list is not super fleshed out because it was my first time playing the deck, but I want to do an effort of explaining the cards anyways so that you guys know what's going on. I knew some of it, but there's definitely some things that I learned. Okay, so Refrain is the first one. The most important part of Refrain's effect is that on summon, she fetches a Melodious monster from the deck, and both of the Melodious scales, Refrain and Couplet, when they are in the extra deck and you special summon a Melodious Fusion, they can place themselves back into the Pendulum scale. So that's how you can set up your scales really nicely. In the scale, you can target a Melodious Fusion you control and send a Melodious monster from the deck to the graveyard, which is mostly good because you want to fill up your graveyard with some of these Melodiouses, because you have plenty of ways to get them back to your hand or reborn them. Couplet is really powerful. If Couplet is added to your hand, either from the grave or the deck, except by drawing basically, you can revive a level 4 or lower Melodious from the graveyard, which is not quite Poplar, but it's also really strong. When it's in the scale and you control no monsters that are not Melodious monsters, so either no monsters or just Melodious, you can grab a Melodious spell from your deck to your hand, and you can only pendulum summon light monsters. And one reason why I wanted to play the pure Melodious deck was because in this deck, Couplet actually can be played as a 3-of, and you are actually not that unhappy about seeing it. It's not a 1-card combo, but it's still pretty good to draw. I played 3 Sonatas. This one is relatively simple. You can special summon it from the hand if you control a Melodious, and it boosts every fairy by 500 attack and defense. This card is often being played at 2. I decided to play 3 because I wanted to have more fairies for Herald of Orange Light. I think it's completely fine to play 2. It's not once per turn to special this thing. A lot of the old Melodiouses don't have once per turns. It helped me do some OTKs because you have limited access to the extra deck because you're locked into Melodious. That is pretty limited to fusions. Sometimes you just have to have your main deck monsters do a lot of work because you can't fuse unlimited times. So sometimes you're just like beating them down with the main deck monsters and this thing boosting everything by 500. Sometimes I put 2 or 3 of these up and everything gets like really big. I think it's fine. And it's just a generic extender. If you get hand trapped, you can go into your Link monster and keep playing from there. 2 Sopranos. When it's special summoned, you can add a Melodious from the graveyard back to your hand. This is when you can, so this can miss timing. You need to be careful about that. The easiest way to do it is if you pendulum summon it, it doesn't miss timing. But if you revive it with one of your effects, you want to make sure that that is Chain Link 1. And then you have Canon, the Melodious Diva, which is basically comparable to Sonata because if you control a Melodious, you can special it from the hand. This special summon is only once per turn though. And the other effect, which might not seem very relevant, is once per turn you can target a Melodious and change its battle position. The reason why that can sometimes come up is because the Link monster special summons 2 from the deck in defense position. So if you want one of those to be able to attack, you can use Canon to turn it to attack position. I didn't do it, but it can be relevant. Then we have Aria, the Melodious Diva, which is only a one-off, but it's really accessible and really powerful. While this special summon card is on the field, Melodiouses you control can't be targeted or be destroyed by battle. So this is one thing you want to try to end on or try to establish relatively early when you play into boards, because this makes all of your stuff untargetable. I did notice that most decks have ways to deal with this card. Like for example, I played against Labyrinth and they obviously had a bunch of ways to deal with it. Lovely or Labyrinth, Pop and stuff like that. Branded has ways to deal with it in Mirror Jade and Super Poly and all this kind of stuff. Even Snake Eyes can deal with it with Zelantis. It's not like you can summon this thing and just sit on it and win the game. It's more like supposed to help you protect from certain things in certain situations. And then we have Chopina. Please mention the Refrain Aria interaction. What is the Refrain Aria interaction? Oh, you mean you can't use the scale effect when you have Aria? Yes. When you said interaction, I thought you meant like a positive interaction, but yes, you have to be careful. This means you also cannot target your Melodiouses. So you cannot use this to change position and you cannot use this to send from deck to graveyard. Yes, you're right. Anyways, Chopina is important for a couple of reasons. It's a level 7, so it sometimes be kind of iffy to draw, but if you can play, it's okay to have it. It's a Maestra, which is important for some fusions, and it's once per turn. You can target a light fairy type monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You cannot activate non-light monsters effects during the turn you activate this effect. So this is not hard once per turn. So what you can do with this is you can summon it, you can add something back, get it into the graveyard, you can revive it, and then you can do it again. It's not limited to Melodiouses, it's any light fairy. So one thing you can do with this is you can recycle Herald of Orange Light. Very strong. You have to be very aware of the restriction. There was one game against Branded, I used DD Crow, and then I went for a Chopina line. I added back with the Chopina, and then I realized, wait, I can't do that. So I had to put the card back into the graveyard. I was really looking forward to it. I was like, dude, I can use Chopina like 2 or 3 times in this turn. I couldn't because I had used DD Crow previously, so you have to be aware of that. That's my monster lineup. I don't think there's anything else you want to play. I think Tum and Polly could be okay. Then we have 3 Ostinatos. Obviously, you need to control no monsters, then you can fusion summon a Melodious by sending the material from your hand or deck. During the end phase, it would destroy that fusion summoned monster and return the materials from the graveyard. That is why you can also bell this. Usually that does not happen because you like fuse with the thing that you summon or do something else with it. This card is not hard once per turn, even though you do need to control no monsters for it. First Movement Solo is a card that I paid for after the hype. That was very painful, but I really wanted to try the deck. The card is very expensive now, which is unfortunate. If you control no monsters, you just special summon a level 4 lower Melodious from hand or deck, which is usually your refrain. You can only summon Melodious monsters during the entire. There are sometimes some weird spots where you draw both of these cards and you have to decide which one you use first because both require you to have no monsters. I think the more important one to resolve would be Ostinato. So it's weird because if you want to like bait an Ash Blossom, you would want to start with First Movement Solo, but then if your opponent doesn't have the Ash, then you have a monster and you can't use Ostinato. There is ways you can sometimes clear your board. You can go into the Flowering a Toil and then banish your entire board and then use the other one, right? Which is really cool. Those were not the lines that I was going in for yesterday because I played the deck for the first time. Those are some advanced stuff. I'm starting to see these sort of things now after I've played the deck for an entire day. And then one Concerto. Concerto is the fusion spell you get to search for free from your couplet, and it fusion summons a Melodious by using monsters from Hand, Field, and Pendulum Scale. And when a fusion is sent to your graveyard, you can put it back to the bottom of the deck and draw a card. The basic play you do with Concerto is the way you get there is different, but like, let's say, for example, you would go Refrain, you would grab Couplet, you would put Couplet in the Pendulum Scale if you don't have anything to revive. You would grab Concerto, and then you would Concerto fuse with these two into a Baja, and then these two would go back into the Pendulum Scale because a fusion was summoned and they're both in the extra deck, right? And that's the main way you can make use of all of these effects. That's the Melodious cards. The rest is basically non-engine. I played Prosperity. Prosperity is really strong in this deck because it has a lot of one-card starters and all that kind of stuff. The one thing that's really annoying about Prosperity is that you cannot get your Concerto draw if you use Prosperity in the same turn. It can be very annoying if that happens. I figured the added consistency was worth it because I noticed that a lot of the times, so what happens is your Concerto is just stuck in the graveyard, right? You can't draw with it on this turn, but when your opponent starts playing into your board, maybe a fusion monster gets sent into the graveyard that way, and then you can draw the card on your opponent's turn. I saw that Herman, who won Swedish Nationals with this deck, play Desires, which I think is good. However, I was afraid that I was going to mess up the resource loop if I'm missing like certain pieces of the deck if I have to use Desires. So I think Desires is something that you can try. I think in order to learn the deck, it was good for me to just play Prosperity and go for max consistency. And honestly, I didn't mind the restriction too much. I don't even know if I would play Desires at this point. Herald of the Orange Light, which all of these are fairies. So this card is really good. It does not conflict with this restriction either because it is a light fairy. And you can even recycle it back from the graveyard. This card is perfect for this deck. I used this on like Nibiru's to safely OTK. That way I didn't have to banish my entire board with Flowering Etoile, all this kind of stuff, right? Really good card in this deck. And obviously in a format that is very hand trap driven, this helps you play through hand traps. I heralded a Bestial, for example, with this and then added it back on the same turn. I played Ash, Baylor, and Imperm as my hand traps. I decided not to play something more situational like Ghost Ogre because I wasn't sure what kind of decks people would be playing at locals. I played Talents and I played Gold Bites, 40 cards. That's the non-engine I chose. I think Herald of the Orange Light and like generic hand traps are the best way to play the deck at the moment. These ones down here are probably interchangeable if you really want to, and you can definitely mess around with some of the Melodious ratios. I just tried a cookie cutter list just to learn how the deck works, and that was pretty cool. For the extra deck, 3 Baja. So this requires any 2 Melodious. While you control this fusion summoned card, the activated effects of your Melodious fusion monsters cannot be negated. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon a Melodious monster from your deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a Melodious in your grave and special summon it in defense position. This card is absolutely crazy. You try to fusion summon into this card every single time. It depends what you open with. Like if you open Ostinato, you go into this one right away. If you open Refrain, you go Refrain, Couplet, Concerto, and then you go into this. Basically, I think in every single game, this was the first fusion I made. Because it gets you going. It gets you a body on the board that summons another one from the deck, which can also vary depending on which effects you've already used. One thing I want to bring up is this card cannot be negated by Ash Blossom, but I think this card has a very interesting interaction with Impermanence and Effect Veiler, which I'm not 100% certain, but the way I think it works, because it says, while you control this fusion summoned card, the activated effects of Melodious fusions cannot be negated. The way this interacts with Impermanence and Effect Veiler, I think, is it's very weird because the effect to summon from the deck is an activated effect. So in theory, that one cannot be negated. However, the effect that prevents your stuff from being negated is a permanent effect, so that one can be negated. So if you impermanence this card, which is a legal thing, the impermanence will resolve. The continuous effect to protect your activated effects is turned off by imperm, which means that on resolution then, the imperm resolves, stopping that effect, and then when this is trying to resolve, it's negated. So imperm and Effect Veiler work on this card, which is why very often you want to summon it in the extra monster zone. In case it gets impermed or veilered, what you can do is you can link it into Gravity Controller if you're not locked into Melodious to get the revive. And then we have, honestly, one of my favorite boss monsters I've seen in a long time in terms of its design, which is Flowering Etoile, the Melodious Magnificat. This card is really cool, really strong, but honestly very nicely designed, I think, because this thing unites so many things in one card. without being, in my opinion, too broken. This one needs a Melodious Maestra, which is important. Baja is a Maestra, Schmidt is a Maestra, Schubert is also a Maestra. It needs a Maestra and 2 other Melodious, and it has a quick effect that says you can banish until the end phase any number of Melodious monsters you control, then you can return up to that many face-up cards your opponent controls to the hand. So you banish your entire board until the end phase. It doesn't have to be your entire board. You can also banish just 1 or 2, whichever one you want to do. Bounce up to that many cards. You don't have to bounce anything though. And what this means is that if you summon this and your opponent uses Nibiru, you can banish your entire board until the end phase. The Nibiru is not going to do anything to you and all your things are going to return in the end phase. And it also gives you interruption on your opponent's turn by saving all your things for the next end phase. This card is really powerful, but I find it very cool how they managed to give this deck a way to beat Nibiru that isn't just an Omni Negate, right? It's super annoying whenever like a deck just gets like, oh, here's a way to make an Omni Negate before summon number 5, right? And I think that's super boring design. The thing is that having to banish your entire board all the time can sometimes be a downside, you know? Sometimes it's like, well, I wanted to keep playing, but in order to save my board from Nib, I had to banish everything, so I can't do more stuff from here on out, so I guess I'll have to pass. I'll keep my board, but my turn still ends. Like, it's not like Nibiru doesn't do anything, right? You can do second Ostinato if you're crazy like that, but you know what I mean. Also, if it leaves the field by your opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, you can special summon a Melodious from deck or extra deck, except itself. And then there's another cool thing you can do with it, which has something to do with Schuberta. That's one of the older ones. It requires any 2 Melodious. During either player's turn, you can target up to 3 cards in any graveyards, banish them. If you do, this card gains 200 attack for each. This effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. One really cool thing you can do, you can summon this on your own turn to interact with your opponent's graveyard, and then you can banish it until the end phase with a toil. It comes back. You can use it again on the opponent's turn to have it as a disruption. Another card that is honestly just fun to play with because it's not super broken, it's not incredibly strong on its own, but if you can make it work in the right circumstances, it's really good. It's a very fun deck, honestly, and it has a lot more interactions than I was expecting. It can protect your hand traps from Called by the Grave. It can also do that, yeah. It is also usable in the damage step, yes, because it gives itself attack points. That's another good point. I didn't do that yesterday, but in theory, yes. Let's say your opponent has, for example, a Branded Retribution in the graveyard. If you just activate this, they can chain it. What you can do is you can go to battle, you can attack, and then you can go damage step, effect, target your Branded Retribution, and because it's damage step, they can't chain it. I decided to play 1 Bloom Diva, the Melodious Core. I will say this extra deck is exactly Herman's extra deck except for this card. I put this card in because Herman was playing an Underworld Goddess and I was late for locals almost, and I scrambled to find my Underworld Goddess, so I put this in. I didn't summon it. I still think it could be okay to keep playing it because I kind of looked at it a couple times and I was like, I like having this option. It needs a Melodious Maestra and a Melodious monster. Can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. Also, you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. If this card battles a special summoned monster, after damage calc, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the difference between the original attack of that monster and this card, and if you do, destroy that opponent's monster. I think it's a solid card that can out a lot of things in certain situations, and just having another option for a fusion summon is not bad. I didn't use this, but I also wouldn't have used Underworld Goddess, but I did like the option of having this card. And then we play 1 copy of Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer, which is a Link 2 that requires 2 fairies. This one says you can only special summon Melodious monsters in the entire turn. Another card with a fair lock on it. Literally, it's only missing on Ostinato. If this card is Link summoned, you can discard a card, special summon 2 Melodiouses with different levels from your deck to your zone's discard points to in defense position. If a Melodious monster discard points to attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. I don't think I used this card to its full potential, to be honest, because a lot of the times I just summoned some stuff in defense and then couldn't really do that much with it. I think the way you're supposed to use this one is because there's another thing that I noticed towards the end of the tournament regarding this. A lot of the time I was stuck with a lot of Melodious bodies on the board without many good ways to use them, because one thing that I didn't realize about this is that the effect to add back a Melodious from the graveyard is hard once per turn. The effect to fusion summon is not once per turn. So I didn't realize that you can do this multiple times. So I was like, okay, I really want to make like a Schuberta on top of what I already have. I didn't figure out a way to do it because I had already used this and I didn't realize you could do it again. So I think this is one thing you can do with this for it to have immediate board impact, is you can just summon another soprano that basically gets you another whichever fusion you want. Plus, this is one of the main ways I think how you would play through hand traps. Let's say your Baja gets hand trapped, you can like special summon a Sonata and go into Bloom. So really, really powerful card. I don't think I used it in the best way possible. I mean, that's what locals are for. That's why I'm really glad I brought this deck to locals, because I'm really glad I got some time with it and played it. It was really fun. Then you play Protector of the Agent's Moon, needs 2 fairies, contribute any fairy to destroy a card. This is a way to out skill drain, and it's a way, if you're not locked into Melodious for the entire turn, you could use this one to clear your board, for example. And then there's also Haggard Lizardos, which can do kind of the same thing. It lets you clear your own board. There was one game where I ended on Gravity Controller and Baguska because I got hand trapped a bunch. This can only not be used as link material during the turn it was summoned. So like a couple turns later, I made a Haggard Lizardos, banished it to draw a card, cleared my board, and was able to activate Ostinato. The Gravity Controller is mainly to be able to link off your Baja in the extra monster zone to get the revive. There's an SP Little Knight, because it's SP Little Knight. It's a very strong card still. Didn't make it though. This deck fusion summons a lot of the time, and these most of the time, if you have good hands, you're locked out of these anyways, but you have some options. Baguska was the only rank 4 I played. Like I said, it came up when I got hand trapped a lot, and it did win me that game. And then there's one Typhon, which I did not make. So yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't miss anything. At the same time, I also probably didn't play the deck perfect. The side deck also was kind of arbitrary. I played 3 Ghost Ogres just in case anyone would rock up with Tenpai or Pearly or any decks of those natures. There's one thing I realized about this deck. There was a lot of things I liked about this deck. There were also some things that have me worried about it. This deck is randomly weak to a lot of the cards that people play at the moment, and one of those cards is Ghost Ogre. Like, Ghost Ogre is good against this deck because you can hit the scales. Hitting the couplet with it I think is really annoying because you don't get your fusion spell and all that kind of stuff. D-Barrier is really good against this deck because it obviously mainly fusion summons, and people are playing D-Barrier for like Branded and Tenpai, so you get caught in the crossfire there. Bystials are also good against this deck. You don't auto lose to a Bystial, but Bystials are solid, right? When you're trying to revive something, you're trying to add something back from the graveyard multiple times per turn. Very often your opponent's Bystial is going to be annoying, right? And Bystials are being played a decent amount right now because they're good against certain other meta decks. So you are being caught in the crossfire a lot of the times. I played 3 Crows. I did not play Bystials because you don't want to have anything on the board. This is why there's no Nibiru, there's no Bystials, there's no Phantasme, all those kind of things. I don't want to start my turn with those because I want to be able to activate Ostinato or First Movement Soul. There's a Tam, you know, it does 500 damage. The reason why I don't think you should ever main deck this is because I learned that you can fuse multiple times with Soprano. Whenever you would special summon this to grab a Poly, you could just special summon another Soprano to fuse with that. It didn't come up yesterday, but I think in a big tournament with this deck, you would want to play this, obviously, for time's sake. 3 cross out for going first. You play pretty much all the hand traps. There should probably be a Bell in here so that you can cross out Bell in case they Bell your Ostinato. And Bell is just an okay card overall. I did not play Bell because similar reason to Goddess, I was late and I couldn't find it. I played 3 Thrust. The idea was that if I get to go first against Tenpai, or I have to go first against Tenpai, I can use Ogre and I can use Thrust for D-Barrier. And if I go second, you can use Thrust obviously for Talents, for Ostinato, for whatever. I played 1 Duster as well. Going second, you can side Cross out with D-Barrier. Going first, you can side Thrust with D-Barrier. I think that's a neat interaction if you expect your opponent to be playing D-Barrier. This was the side deck I threw together. I have no issues with it, honestly. I had something for everything except for I didn't have much against Lab. And that's the deck. I enjoyed it. I played terribly with it. I will say that. It's a lot more complicated than I expected it to be. It's also my own fault. I thought I could just bring a deck to locals for the first time, never having played it before or never having even looked at the combos in much detail. I think I got a little lucky to go undefeated with it. After like a couple rounds, I kind of got the hang of it and I only made like a couple mistakes here and there. But that's very natural. I think that's part of the process. I think it says a lot about the deck's power, honestly. I will maybe look into it more for Nationals. I'm not sure yet. That was this week's Locals Report. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Looking forward for more Locals Reports in the future. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a great rest of your day, YouTube. Bye-bye.